Twitter Spaces, and even Clubhouse. We appreciate you. If you're interested in being a guest on the RTJ podcast show, we only take kings and queens that have phenomenal testimonies and that fit the mold of our mission and our vision for RTJ. But you can click the link that we're putting in the comment section below to have our team comb through and see if you have what it takes to be a part of our next season. But we appreciate all of our VIP jewels that have come on the show this season. We could not have made the show a success without you. But for those who are interested, take your chance and see through our interest form if you have what it takes. And then last but not least, for all wisdom listeners in Twitter Space who may be joining us, if you have any questions for my very special guests, list them in the comment section below, or for wisdom or Twitter, you can come onto the stage and ask any question for my very special VIP guest, and we'll do our best to have them answer it to the best of their abilities. And so those are all of my housekeeping for our episode today. We are locked and loaded, ready for this episode that we are going to be talking to my very special VIP about how to pivot from a broadcasting career into podcasting. So for those who may come from a communications, mass comm background, and you are wanting to literally have a career transition or a career pivot, I met this young queen by way of the Black Pod Festival here in Atlanta. Shout out to Ona and also her team that put on a magnificent all-Black affair for Black creatives and Black podcasters. And she put me on to game about a ton of the background of podcasting and how to get plugged into even jobs, freelance positions, and how she even was able to get her own podcasting job just from literally networking and net weaving with other podcast creatives. And so she's an excellent voice when it comes to this industry, especially coming from a broadcasting background. And so I want to introduce you to my very special VIP guest, Miss Ashley Long. Ashley, how are you doing today, Queen?
Hey, Julian. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Everything is going well on this side. Ashley, we definitely thank you for taking time to share your jewels with us today for our episode. What we usually start off is having you as our guest. Ashley, tell us where you're originally from, your hometown, and also where you're streaming with us today. And why is this an important subject, Ashley, for you to discuss with our audience?
Yeah, so I am from Dayton, Ohio. Shout out to Dayton, born and raised. I'm now living in Orlando, Florida. So I'm in the heat now. Basically, I wanted to break up with winter, but still have so much love for my hometown. I transitioned about 5 years ago. Speaking of a broadcast career, for a job opportunity with a station here locally. So here I am. And about your question about why this subject is important, I think it's important just because, we've been in a time of such uncertainty, but, for sure for me, I've had other aspirations for my career, even with the uncertainty we face with COVID and with all the things that have been going on the past couple of years. And I've dived into podcasting full force. So while I still love a lot of the things about the broadcast industry, I just felt like it was a good time and a great opportunity came my way to kind of fully transition into this new arena that I kind of fell in love with. So here we are.
Yeah, it's definitely a blessing to come from a mass comm or broadcast field. So for those who are listening, we're here with my very special VIP guest, Miss Ashley Long, who is literally showing you the step-by-step process of how you can pivot from a broadcast journalism or even mass comm background to literally go into podcasting. She is a podcaster. I forgot to even mention herself. And she even has her own, I believe, plethora of podcasts that she runs and also hosts and produces. And so we're definitely going to be hearing from her expertise. For those who are interested in asking Ashley any questions, feel free to come onto the stage at any time for Twitter Space users or even wisdom listeners to ask Ashley any questions. No question is too large or too out there. But Ashley, start from the beginning. Like where did you get a love for broadcasting, Ashley? Did you have people in your family that were into any form of mass comm growing up? Did you have any people that you aspired to want to go after their footprints in going into mass communications? Like, how did you start in that field?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I originally wanted to go into medicine. Like, I thought I was going to be a pediatrician because I wanted to help children. And as I navigated through, going through high school, I was very focused on my academics, but I was still so undecided about, future career. So I had to go to a career advisor essentially my senior year to kind of figure out my next moves. And it was between chemistry and writing and English for me because I loved both subjects. And I originally was going into chemistry and I was going to be a pharmacy major. And it took about one semester for me to realize, I don't think I would want to do this for the rest of my life. So then I was like, well, I still have the writing. And so there was no person in my life that kind of inspired me to want to do it. It was just like, well, journalism seems like it would be a good fit. I always have had a love for, again, writing. And particularly, I thought journalism would be an interesting path because there's so many avenues you can take with it. So I was a mass comm print journalism major specifically. So I got a chance while I was in college to write for the local newspaper and get some hands-on experience there. And that led into an internship with the media company that I worked at for the majority of my career thus far. So it was really just a matter of figuring out what it was, even back in high school and college, that I was actually passionate about and trying to follow that and let that guide me into the career that I was meant to be in.
Yeah, and that's inspirational, especially that you've had that a stage of growth coming from high school into college and now into your career and profession of wanting to even get into broadcasting. I know, Ashley, myself, I went to Hampton University by way of their Scripps Howard School of Broadcast Journalism, but had to transition out of Hampton my junior year to come back here in Atlanta to Kennesaw State. But I always stayed in some form of broadcasting. And that's what literally got me want to go into podcasting by way of radio broadcasting. And so for those who may not know, Ashley, break down, what are some of the areas of broadcasting for those who may not have been mass comm majors? What are some of the areas you can go into for broadcasting?
Yeah, so I know it's changed a bit since I was in school because I'm a millennial too, but things have changed for the next generation that's so much more focused on digital media. So I know when it comes to, I'll just use mass comm as a whole because again, I was a mass comm print journalism focused, but there was PR that you could go into. There was broadcast journalism specifically, right, where you're trying to be on air, whether that's through radio, whether that's through television. And then I know digital is now a big part too, where you're learning the ins and outs of kind of moving more into a digital media space, which is very important and very relevant, obviously, today. But for me, with my company that I worked for, we had print, we had television, we had radio, and we also had digital. So we still had all of those components that were available to you. And there's so many jobs within that, right? Like for a TV station, for instance, which is the last broadcast thing that I was really working in was television. I worked in television programming, which I didn't even know was a thing when I was in school. So with television programming, you're in the department that basically is responsible for everything outside of the newscast. So my department was the ones who negotiated for your Ellens, your Dr. Phil's, all of those syndicated shows that you may see on your station every single day. And it was just a new opportunity that kind of fell into my lap because I was always open and wanting more and wanting to learn more within the different areas that I went through. So my journey was not like, oh, I went from A to B to C. It was more so like, okay, this opportunity opened up because I raised my hand or I talked to this person about, hey, I think I would be interested in that. And so things just kind of navigated for me from there because as I mentioned, when I was in school, I was able to write for our newspaper. But by the time I actually got out of school, I was like, actually, I don't think I want to be a print writer, because for one, I didn't love the structure. I prefer more of a creative writing style than I did the structure of actually having to write a newspaper article, right? Because they're very different. And then because of that, I was like, well, let me still go into media. I want to get some additional skills. So then I went the sales route. I was in sales and sales support for a few years. And then from that, I was like, well, I still want to use my degree a little bit. I don't think I want to be a sales rep. So then I ended up going into a position that allowed me to write public service announcements and produce them for local nonprofits. Loved it, was wonderful. And I started getting exposure to TV and radio. So the broadcast side of things just kind of came because my company converged. The opportunities came because of our convergence. And then I was never shy about saying like, hey, I really want a chance to step into this lane or figure this out. I feel like I have the capacity to do so. And I personally just don't like being stagnant. So
yeah, Ashley's giving you all the blueprint of literally how to get into mass comm and the different levels of it. I know even Ashley, I was confused when I found out how many different careers that you can get into in communications, and especially broadcast communication fields. And so I know we're going to definitely have you dive more into how you decided to pivot from coming out of the television side of broadcasting into podcasting shortly after this quick commercial break. But for those who have been rocking with us, you should already know that we highlight a VIP sponsor each and every episode, which is a business or a service provider that we've either partnered with or have an affiliate partnership to. And so shout out to our VIP sponsor who we're highlighting for today. Let's take a look and see who they are for today's episode, you all. So shout out again to our affiliate VIP partner for today, which comes from none other than StreamYard. StreamYard is actually the platform that we are streaming from right now for our podcast. And you can receive an exclusive $10 off discount code by clicking on the link that we're putting in the comment section below. If you are a gamer that likes to stream via Twitch, if you are someone that is a content creator that wants to stream your live show or live podcast on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I believe those are the main ones that StreamYard streams to as of right now, but we love StreamYard. Our team found out about StreamYard a little over a year ago, and we use it to stream to multiple platforms at the same time while also producing and providing technical assistance for other shows that we have, again, co-produced. And so shout out again to StreamYard, the platform that we are even using right now today. And you can receive an exclusive link for $10 off right below. And so click the link, you all. But Ashley, back to you, Queen. We definitely wanted to highlight StreamYard for today's episode. But talk to us about like the television field. Like a lot of people see the end product of being literally listeners or viewers that are watching these shows being produced, that are watching the news channel outlets. Like, is the behind the scenes as crazy as we hear about, where people are literally on the microphones and on headsets, like literally running around like a chicken with their head cut off? Like, are the producers going crazy? Like, talk to us about the behind the scenes field of television broadcasting.
Yeah, so obviously, I'm sure a lot of the interpretations you see on programs like the morning show on Apple TV and stuff like that may be a bit exaggerated, even at the national level. But on the local level, which is where I've always worked, you definitely have your times. I mean, it just depends on kind of what's going on. If there's a situation where, you know, things are kind of crunch time and last minute, yeah, you're going to see some running around. You're going to see a little bit of chaos. But for the most part, you know, things are pretty relaxed, I would say. I'm sure some of my old coworkers are like, I would completely disagree with you, but I would still say, I mean, it's not that glamorized sense of things, because it's really, you know, let's say it's election season, like we just had here in Florida for the primaries. Yeah, you're gonna see probably a little bit more chaos going on in like the newsroom, and there's different, you know, depending on the building you're in, depending on the circumstances, there are different areas of the building. You have master control, which is the kind of brain center of everything that's going on. You have the area that the producers and technical directors are working in. You have the newsroom where the actual reporters and all of those folks sit. And then you have different sections where, like, traffic, which is a department that a lot of folks may not realize exists who are not in this space. Traffic is basically the department that handles everything that goes onto the logs, as we call it, which is what actually programs or runs everything that you're seeing on air. So there's that department. Again, my department was programming. You also have promotions. You have all of these different departments who are in the building together. So there may only be a couple departments where you may see a little bit more of the craziness. But again, it depends if there's a major event going on, if we have, you know, major breaking news, because I've been in the newsroom, for instance, during like the Boston Marathon bombing. I've been in the newsroom for multiple now significant events, and those events are a little bit more chaotic.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of parodies and of course comedy sketches that I see when it comes to the broadcasting field. And so shout out to all of those that do work in television or even in radio. I know it's two different elements of broadcasting, but it is definitely a journey, to say the least, for those who have put in their time and their work in that career field. And so, like, Ashley, stay with that point too. Like, podcasting is still a growing field, and also a lot of people that I'm sure you've talked to, just like myself, they still are like, what is podcasting? Like, is it a digital form of radio broadcasting? They think it's really the same thing. Like, how did you learn, Ashley, about podcasting? And even like, who were you listening to when you first found out about podcasting? Like, what shows or what personalities were you following?
So the first podcast I ever heard was The Read, and I feel like that's very common that I've heard that's a lot of people's first, at least Black people, first introduction into the podcast space was The Read. But the way I probably found out about it is just through my own exposure, again, to media, because podcasting is still a form of media, whether, you know, however you may want to label it. But for me, getting more involved, like actually from a work perspective, came because there was a podcast contest at my company, and there was one winner that came out of my building, Vanessa Eccles, who was a longtime reporter for the TV station that I just departed from. And she asked me to come on as the first guest of like her kind of test panel. And from there, I was like, oh, absolutely, I would love to. You know what I'm saying? And that test panel, she enjoyed it, went well. And she was like, hey, I'd love to have you back. And I was like, great, but can I also help? Like, I want to learn the other facets of kind of podcast production, because I've always had that itch for production. I like the actual creation of the work, right? So that was really my foray into becoming more integrated into it, just from a business or working perspective. perspective. But even to this day, like I'm still just a fan of listening to podcasts personally. Like I love Higher Learning with Van Lathan and Rachel Lindsay. That's one of my favorites. I love Dropping Gems with Debbie Brown. That's my girl. Like her voice, as soon as it comes on, I feel soothed. You know what I mean? So there's some great podcasts out there that I'm still just a fan of. It was the same way for me with television and with everything. Like I am such a avid lover of these things that I'm grateful that I actually get a chance to get involved in and work in and do. So starts with my fandom.
Yeah, absolutely. We all got to have those podcasts that we are following, and even those personalities that we are literally fans of, just like you said, Ashley, and going into that field. And so, like, wisdom listeners, if you have any questions for Ashley, feel free to come onto the stage and ask any questions of her before we continue. But I know, Ashley, I wanted to know with the skill set, you are someone who is very technically based, and even being able to work behind the scenes in your profession. Like, what skills have you acquired from like working in the broadcasting field that have been able to pivot into the podcasting industry? And like, what are some, say, skill sets that you would recommend people that want to get into podcasting should already have coming in?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. What skills do I feel like I have acquired that have translated? Well, I think there in general, having an understanding of kind of the industry in terms of, you know, some of the technical is great, but a lot of those things you can learn as you're going, like once you get hired somewhere. Because say, for instance, when you talk about podcast platforms, right? Which podcast platform is best for me to utilize? Is it Megaphone? Is it Podbean? Is it all these various ones? Those are things that I don't feel like are just, you know, things you have to know right off the bat. But I think you should know, for instance, that you're going to need a podcast platform for your RSS feed in order to navigate getting your podcast out to all the various platforms you want to get into. I think one of the skills that has translated for me probably between the careers is a interest and a hunger for the information. Like, I think, again, if you're driven by the passion and interest, to me, that's something that's going to translate no matter which direction you choose to go into. Some other skills, let me think. I would say in terms of transitioning for me between broadcasting traditionally and going into the podcast space, it was also, you know, having some ideas of like marketing capabilities or some levels of like social media engagement, those sort of things. But again, you can acquire those in a lot of other ways as well. I think it's just a matter of, you know, doing a little bit of research if this is an area or lane you want to go into, getting a feel for and talking to other people, accessing resources, that sort of thing, and kind of diving in. Because honestly, to me, at this stage of the game, in terms of access, there's really nothing you can't learn. Right? There's really nothing you can't go online and figure out or watch a video and figure out. So I think regardless of where you're starting from, you're in a good position no matter what to dive into it, because it's not like you're doing brain surgery. It's not like you're going into something where you have to have these very select technical skills to even get your foot in the door.
Yeah, no, that's a great point that you're making too, Ashley. And I know I'm glad you broke down the difference between the technical side of podcasting or broadcasting versus being the personality or the host or the talent. And so, like, for those who may not know, especially from a podcast perspective, like how did you get into wanting to be the talent and actually hosting your own podcast or podcast plural versus wanting to be behind the scenes, like putting together the editing, the putting together the show notes, all the technical pieces of a podcast? Like, how did you get into the hosting seat? And then, like, what are some things that you feel people need to have, whether it's confidence, whether it's certain skills to be a talent versus being behind the scenes?
So I feel like I became talent out of sheer necessity, right? It was a matter of, again, my passion has been on the production side, even for television. Like I never had an interest in being on air necessarily. So for me, when I decided to start my personal podcast, recapping with Delora and Ashley, shout out to my girl Delora, my co-host. We both had an interest in having a podcast where we talked about entertainment, movies, and TV, because that's our passion that we share. But for me, as I told her when we even got started, for me, it's helping to translate some of those skills that I want to continue to develop in for my professional side, because I was already working on a show called Colorblind Race Across Generations, and I was a producer on it. But I wanted to sharpen up on my editing skills, as you mentioned. I wanted to sharpen up on, how does this really go from A to B when it comes to, your idea and idea generation, to deciding on your name, to deciding on your artwork, to all those things, to then launching it and maintaining it for a however long that you intend to have your podcast. So for me, talent came out of a necessity to want to continue to learn. But then also, I mean, it's just kind of fun to be able to get on the mic week in and week out on a subject that I really have a very strong interest in. And I would say, in terms of skills that you need to do that, confidence would definitely be great. Making sure that you're trying to get great equipment, because that's something too. Like when we first started out, we had, mics we got from Amazon, which was fine. We had the arm, we had all those things, but there's still development that goes into that, because obviously over time you realize everything's not made equal when it comes to microphones, when it comes to, again, the service you decide to use for your recordings, all of those things. So I decided to become talent to help develop my skills, and also because it seemed like it was going to be a lot of fun to do with one of my really, really good friends. So
Yeah, you dropped a ton of jewels right there, Queen. Definitely, when it comes to hosting and being the talent, is completely different from being behind the scenes on the production side. And even that's one of the main pivots that I found coming from radio and then going into teaching and speaking, that literally it was a natural pivot for myself to want to even go into podcasting. And I found out that a lot of the folks that I look up to as speakers and even radio broadcasters, they had their own podcast because it was an easy shift. It was an easy shift and transition. And so stay with that point too. Like, how did you find out about careers in podcasting? You were one of the main people, I always tell our team, that put me on game when I met you at the Black Pod Festival, about there's like literally different jobs and different positions that you can work in the podcasting field that is still growing. But like, how did you personally find out about different podcast positions, whether they were freelance or full-time or part-time?
I want to add one thing real quick. The reason why, to me, podcasting too has become a bit more interesting as a career path than traditional broadcast is because you don't have the regulations, right? You don't have the FCC. You don't have to have the same stringency around your content. You have much more creative freedom. So I just wanted to put that out there. But in terms of how I found the position that I'm in now and resources, Pod People, which we've talked about, shout out to the crew at Pod People. It is a resource to bring podcasters together, to offer network support, job postings, meetups, events, all those sorts of things. And I got connected with them because I basically got reached out to through a recruiter, Ashton, who was wonderful, got set up for like an onboarding call. They try to get to know you, ask you a lot of questions, figure out what it is what skill sets you have and what you may be interested in. And, just you get your information set up on the website. You get connected through all the notifications and alerts. I get gold star moments all the time on my phone of people that are a part of the network kind of just posting about, great moments they've had. And so it's a phenomenal resource. And because of that onboarding process, they said, well, if there's a good job that comes your way, do you want it? I said, it kind of have to be dream job because I really enjoy what I do. I'm not really looking for anything. And cut to the VP of talent sent me a job posting for my current position. And I was like, well, you know what? If nothing else, this will be great interview experience. But the company that I work for now, Turncast, is a startup. And the focus is on podcast production for finance and fintech companies. And it just really interested me for one, because I feel like finance is a space that I didn't have a lot of experience in. And I thought it would be interesting to dive into that area, particularly with content creation, but also the idea of going to a startup, right? Where you have a bit more flexibility, you have a bit more ability to help create culture and things like that, which at my previous company, which has been around for 100 years, I did not necessarily have those opportunities. So Pod People is a fantastic resource for podcasters out there. I would encourage everybody to check it out and get connected.
Shout out to Pod People. I know Ashley put me on game to Pod People, and I just really recently joined their ecosystem, and literally she's telling you the blueprint jewels, you all. She's dropping a ton of jewels on our episode to show you how the step-by-step process should be to get into the podcasting industry, especially if you come from a broadcasting background. And so like one of the other areas, like you telling me even from when we met, was that you have the flexibility. And flexibility can mean certain things to certain people, but especially to us as millennials, when I'm thinking of flexibility, I'm thinking of work from home. I'm thinking of remote work, thinking of being able to literally travel and still make money at the same time. So like, how can someone be in the podcasting field and work remote or have that type of flexibility? Ashley, do you think that's possible? Have you seen it for yourself? And what are some of the benefits of being able to have that flexibility?
Absolutely, it's possible. I am a remote worker now fully, and it's wonderful. I mean, I never thought I would see this day, especially working in the broadcast industry for as long, in the media industry for as long as I did. It was really one of those you need to be in the office for, and there are still positions within that you absolutely have to be in the office for. But with podcasting, I think given the technology, given the fact you can do so much just on your computer, your laptop, your cell phone, what have you, and still make quality content, it definitely lends itself to the flexibility I'm talking about. And for me, being a remote worker is great because I get to craft my day a little bit differently than I ever did when I actually had to go into the office. Don't have to deal with morning traffic, which living here in Orlando is a beautiful thing, baby, as I'm sure everybody who's listening who lives in a major city can attest to, right? The flexibility to, for instance, at the end of this month, I'm going to go back to Ohio and visit, and I can take my laptop and go and not miss a beat when it comes to work. I mean, again, you speak about our generation and millennials. I think we want and we seek that balance in our lives where we're still able to do the things we need to do professionally, but also be able to spend time with, our friends and our family, because the amount of time that you would spend with your coworkers in a normal work life setting was, kind of absurd compared to the amount of time you got to spend with your loved ones. So it's a great thing. Those opportunities are definitely out there for sure, living testament to that. And if that's the direction that you want to go into, I would definitely encourage you to seek out some of those remote opportunities.
Yeah, the remote work is literally pre-COVID and post-COVID the way to go. I think for a lot of folks that were stressing out, especially during those times where literally they didn't know if their job was even going to be secured, if they were going to be able to go around their teams and be in person again. It provides so much reassurance to those who are either remote or even those who are hybrid workers that you don't have to go into the office 24/7. And so like Ashley, stay with that point too. Like, where do you see the podcasting field going? I know you've been even an award winner, and you currently are an award winner, so that people who may not know, they have podcast awards. But like, where do you see like the accolades from those who are podcasters, either just starting up in certain industries of podcasting or who have been already blazing the trail? Like, where do you see it going from awards to exposure to different even Black networks that are starting up, like the ones that you told me about and that I've been a part of, the Black Pod Collective? Like, how do you see it flowing and also growing?
Well, shout out to Black Pod Festival as well. That was amazing, going to the first in-person one that they had just this year in Atlanta. In terms of where I see it going, I mean, we heard research that they talked about the Black Podcast Festival, right, in terms of listenership and the fact that it does continue to grow, and the projection is that it will continue to do so. I think right now the figures were something around like 40% of US adults between certain ages listen to podcasts, and that's definitely grown over the past maybe 5 to 10 years. And as an industry, I think we see the big companies, the Spotify's, those, and the amount of money that they're willing to put in to continue to develop. So I only see it going up. I think that was one of the catalysts for even my decision to move into this lane, is that, you know, it's no shade at all to the industries that I love, like TV and radio. But those definitely have faced a lot of challenges over the past few years due to changes in technology and changes to the habits of folks who watch television, listen to radio, and moving over to streaming options and all of those sorts of things. So I think as an industry, the future is bright. I think in terms of recognition, you know, the award that I have won is a BPA award, which is the Black Podcasting Awards. They're about to have their second annual award show coming up at the end of September. And hopefully I win another award. We'll see. But there's also the AMBIES, which is the Podcast Academy. And that's a huge award. And that their 2023 awards season, I think they just opened up for submission. So everybody make sure you go out and check that out as well as a possibility. But I think, you know, podcasting is still young, it's still fresh, it's still exciting. It can sometimes seem like there's an oversaturation and like everybody and their mom is a podcaster. But I think if you find your niche, if you find your top of your content that you're passionate about, and this is a lane that you really want to get into and learn more about, I think it's a great time. I think it's a great season to dive into podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. And with importance of networks and associations, like you've been part of different networks and associations, even here in Atlanta. We have a few, even with Black Pod Collective, with Ona's entity, and then even Afros and Audio. Like, what are some of the benefits of being connected to an association or a podcast network that people who are just trying to do it on their own and really not connected to a community or a tribe? Like, what are some of the benefits of being a part of an affiliate or affiliation?
That's such a great question. And I think especially being someone who does not have a huge platform behind you, right? If you didn't start out already with name recognition, or you're not a celebrity diving to the podcasting space, those connections and those networks are crucial, because otherwise, how are you going to reach an audience? How are you going to get exposure? How are you going to be able to connect and better market and better push your messaging forward? And I think when it comes to, you know, kind of consolidating with your other podcasters, for instance, you and I, Julian, you know, then I'm able to come on your show and talk about, you know, my podcast and hopefully get more listenership and lend obviously knowledge and wisdom to your listeners as well. So it's a great, you know, connection point, as well as, you know, kind of a give and take that you can have with your other fellow podcasters who need that support, who don't have those engines behind them. So, you know, it's great from a number of perspectives, but when you're doing it all by yourself, which me and my podcast co-hosts do, it's tough. And there's only so many hours and there's only so much you can do. So the connections are so important to just keep you going, to keep you, even if it's just connected with somebody to say, hey, it doesn't seem like, you know, I'm having a really great week, and just lending that ear or lending that support from that perspective as well is wonderful. So it's just like with any industry, networking is going to be crucial to be able to continue to grow.
Yeah, that's a great point that you made right there, Ashley, especially with the importance of associations. I know that was something that I found out from meeting creatives and podcasters like yourself, just through one festival, and just literally being able to network and net weave with those who are actually doing the work and not just going to literally just socialize, but are actually looking to make connections. And so,
and have the keys to some of the big kingdoms as well, because some of the folks who were at that had the keys.
Absolutely. There were some big time people that you had mentioned, and even that I came across others that I'm like, yeah, some heavy hitters, as I like to say, that were at the Black Pod Festival. And I know we got time for one more question. I wanted to just have you just tell people, Ashley, what are some of the jobs or positions that you've seen that people are getting hired for on the production side? We always hear about the talent and the host and the people that are in front or out in the front part of the podcast, but the people that are behind the scenes on the creative side. Like, what are some positions that people may be able to go after, and even that you've seen in working at the startup company that you're currently at?
Yeah, so I'm a production manager. I handle day-to-day operations, but we also have editors. We have our audio engineer. We have writers. We have graphics folks, or video editors, as we call them. So there's multifaceted roles. There's going to be sales roles within podcasting organizations as well, because obviously, just like with a traditional media company, you need to be able to get advertising dollars. There's also going to be marketing, so maybe marketing coordinator, that sort of thing is also going to be probably available within a lot of your podcast companies. But the main ones that I've seen so far are going to be a bit more on the technical side. There are going to be searches for talent, so that still is a thing for sure within organizations, depending on how they're structured. And yeah, those are the main ones I would say that I've seen so far. I'm sure there's a lot of other ones if you peruse job sites, which again, if you want to get into it, just peruse some of the job sites that are out there. There's going to be something that's translatable, I'm sure, for what you may want to do.
Yeah, those are still some key jewels, like Ashley is telling us, that are careers and also even positions on the team, just like she's working on a team with the startup company that you can apply for or even go after. But make sure, like Ashley said, you do have the skill set, because they are going to want to know that you can take care and handle the work just like in any traditional broadcasting job. But there are positions that need to be filled on teams, you all. And so definitely follow up with what Ashley is telling us today and literally see how you can transition or pivot. I know, Ashley, we've come to the last part of our segment today for our interview, which is titled Our Final Jewels segment. I know you've listed a ton of jewels earlier on with telling us how you got into podcasting. You've talked to us about literally how you got from a broadcasting field from a young age and have developed your talent and your skill set to be confident enough to pivot into a growing and blossoming industry such as podcasting. Like, what would be one final jewel, Ashley, that you would leave with the audience for those that may not know where to start, or that they just don't feel that they are confident enough to go into podcasting? Like, what would be a final jewel for those listeners when it comes to why you should consider podcasting today?
Well, I guess I'll give the advice that I gave myself when I was making this major decision, because I have been with my company for 13 years. So it was a major move for me to make. Don't move in fear. And that's really going to be a major theme that hopefully I'll continue to take with me in my career, because if you have an interest in something, if you have a passion for something, there's nothing stopping you but yourself. There's nothing stopping you but possibly that seed of self-doubt. And I think when it comes to podcasting, again, it's an industry that you can learn all of these skills that I'm talking about. You can develop in all these areas you want to develop in. And you can do it just by doing your own research, just by navigating and moving in certain spaces and going to that festival that you heard about that may be coming to your city. So just my final jewel is just to not move in fear, make the decision, go check some things out and see what happens.
Yeah, that made jewel in itself, going to all the festivals. I know I'm on the speaking trail, as Ashley, I told you when I first met, and literally I didn't even know there were podcast movement conferences and things of that nature out in the Dallas and Texas area to California to all over the US and even in the UK. I saw recently from, I think, an Acast or Podbean newsletter. And so there's tons of conferences that people are out there showing others that there is a lane for podcasting. And so thank you again for sharing that, Ashley.
There's actually one in Orlando next week called FinCon. So anybody who's in the content creation space and finance, FinCon is next Wednesday through Saturday.
Shout out to FinCon, especially for all of those in the finance field. Like Ashley said, we definitely always promote finances and also financial freedom, especially on our podcast, Ashley. So thank you. But we want to definitely stay in contact with you and let people know how they can plug in with you and even stay in touch with you. So what are some ways, Ashley, before we say a quick prayer and a blessing over you for coming on the show, how can people stay in touch with you after today?
So definitely check out my personal podcast. It's at Recapping Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and then also follow me and reach out to me via my personal Instagram, which is at A Long Life Lived. I know it's a little bit of a mouthful. You can also reach out to me via like LinkedIn, get connected. Ashley Long, I'm there. And, I'm sure if you have any other thoughts you want to get in touch, just shoot Julian a message and he can let me know.
Absolutely. And just for a quick clarification, if they have any questions about getting into the podcast field, can they reach out to you, or are you someone that can coach and mentor and show them the way to the promised land in that field?
I will do my best. Remember when you asked me about coming on, you were saying teach. I was like, teach may be a stretch. I love to speak on my experience, but I still know there's so much that I need to learn, but it's always helpful to talk to people whose footsteps you want to step into and follow.
Absolutely. And I spoke that into Ashley when I first met her, because I can definitely sense and also sniff out the teachers that are in my midst, especially from being an educator and a speaker. And literally, she's someone who is very dangerous in the broadcast field because she's worked in television broadcasting and it is pivoted into podcasting. And so anyone that knows Masscom knows how literally television networks run the world, specifically in radio second. So literally, she is someone that comes with a wealth of expertise. And so, Ashley, we thank you for sharing with us today. For those who have been blessed by today's episode, feel free to also partner with our podcast. There's two ways that you can sow into good soil. We always believe that you can sow where you reap and also sow into good soil to get a return on your investment. And so two ways to sow. You can cash app us at $SMART, SMART, JEWELZ, or you can click the link that we're putting in the comment section right now to partner with us as a monthly Patreon. And then recently we just launched our Shine Collection apparel line for our podcast show and also our network. And so shout out to all of our Smart Jewels who have already been supporting our Smart Jewels and Shine Collection. But Ashley, we want to say a quick special prayer over you to thank you for coming on the show. And before we let you go, we just wanted to thank you again for taking the time with us today.
Thank you.
Perfect. I'm going to say a quick prayer for you, Ashley, and then let you enjoy the rest of your day. Father God, I just want to thank you for Ashley. We thank you for her knowledge and her wealth of input that she has provided to our audience and our listeners today, just in showing them how you need to start early and also how you need to be just consistent with the work that you're putting in to accomplish the goals and the vision that they have for their lives. And we just ask for anybody that may feel that they are not confident enough to get into podcasting or to get into broadcasting, that they will shun any of those naysaying words that have been spoken. And even we declare that Ashley will even be able to be a resource and also a guide for those who may be needing to see someone that has done it successfully and even that can do it. And we thank you for her and also her position in the podcasting and broadcast field. We pray that you will open new doors for her, new opportunities and new business connections to help elevate her career and even her podcast and her future businesses that you will birth out of her. We thank you for again, the time that you've allowed us to share today. And we ask that you will bless her 100-fold for sowing into our movement. And it's in Jesus, Yeshua's name, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
We appreciate you, Ashley, for coming on. Thank you again, Queen, for taking time out to share your jewels with us. And we'll be in touch.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Julian. I so appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Peace, Queen. We'll talk. All right, y'all. I'm going to do some final jewels for thought. Definitely, you heard a wealth of knowledge from my very special VIP guest, Miss Ashley Long, who was talking to us about how to pivot from broadcasting into podcasting. A ton of people talk about that they're podcasters, But when you literally look at their consistency is caca, it's doo-doo, it is literally trash, because they literally are just podcasting for a season, but they're not being consistent throughout the year to show that they are serious about what they say that they are. And so the $1 million question for you is, are you doing what you said that you are going to do? Are you even walking in what you said that you are? A lot of people talk the talk when it comes to business, entrepreneurship, or even in their careers. But when you look at their resume, when you look at their track record, they are someone that starts and then they stop. Are you someone that is constantly stopping when you start, or are you someone that's seeing through what you said that you were going to do? Are you someone that people can count on you when you say that you're going to do this and accomplish this, and you're even asking for help with this? Or are people wasting their time even following you or listening to you when you do not follow through? That's the $1 million question, you all. You got to answer for yourself. We always speak about being real and also neglecting or shunning the fake. But are you someone that is real about your craft, or are you faking? Are you capping out here in these podcast streets, in these social media streets? Or are you someone that is of substance, someone who is authentic, that you are living and also walking out what you said that you are and what you are going to do? And so those are just some of my final jewels for thought, you all. Definitely see what we are doing here for RTJ this season. So let's take a look and see what are we doing here for RTJ as we get ready to close out this season, you all. Let's take a look. So we provide podcast coaching services all for those who are streaming live for their podcast, their show. You can visit us at www.smartjewelz, JEWELZ, enterprises.org to get started on your live show or your podcast today. The secret to your growth is hiding right in front of you. And so you can take a look and see what services Smart Jewelz Enterprises provides, which power the RTJ show by going to smartjewelzenterprises.org. Also, you can catch us on our podcast on all podcast streaming platforms. Just search for the Run the Jewelz podcast and see my face, yours truly, King Jewelz, hosted by Julian Smartrimple. But we're taking our show global, and also we're taking it on the road. And so I'm excited to see what our team is going to be doing this next season, and literally going to the nations to interview guests in different countries, different hemispheres, and even showing you all as our Smart Jewelz listeners how to have a traveling lifestyle podcast. And so take a look and see what we're doing, and we'll see you all next episode.